great thing out there. I've only found 2 or 3 places in my travels who are clearly like they're on that track. If we know beer and cheese, that's going to be the center of our idea.
Yeah.
Astoria Beer and Cheese being one of them. If people are listening and they're in New York, I think it's called Beer and Cheese Collective now.
There we go.
Okay. They're in Queens.
Right.
And maybe a place called the Waldman out in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. We found that when Craft Brewers Conference was there a couple of years ago. And they were more of like a German-inspired beer hall. So they had a wide variety of things, but they'd bring you a plate of meat and cheese and pickled vegetables. And I was, that's
all day.
Yeah.
Well, so do you now, when it does come to having, I imagine you're having so many different cheeses and meats come in on a regular basis as it is. When you are doing the pairing, do you think of the beer first and then the cheese and meat, or do you kind of maybe try to get the meat and cheese first and then go backwards and try to prepare a beer with it?
It can happen either way.
Okay.
We found out early on that our Belgian wit was an absolute champion with any sort of strongly flavored cheese.
Right.
It has its own distinct flavors. So we put it with like an aged blue cheese, which I was like, what are you going to tell people to pair with the aged blue cheese? That's not just going to either, like an IPA is just going to get a little bit different. A Kolsch is going to get overpowered. It's not even going to be there. We tried it with the Belgian wit and it was like, okay, both of these things are coming on strong, but neither of them are getting in each other's way.
Right.
But at the same time, you taste something that's like light and delicate and you don't want to overpower it with your IPA. I've not yet found a cheese yet that goes well with the IPA, but there's got to be one out there. Right. So it's really just, stock up on a variety of things and try. It's like there's not, as much as I read up on it and like suggested pairings, the more I find that there are no real rules. My palate doesn't work the same way your palate does.
Right.
So when we have a charcuterie board and say, okay, these are the 4 beers in the flight that you're going to want to try, you're not locked into that. You can order the charcuterie board and the beer flight of your own choosing. Try something different. You're going to find something that you like and some reason to go, oh, actually, these 2 things are really good together.
Yeah.
And now I got something new to try. And maybe I don't agree, but that's like, there's no right or wrong answers. And the ideal situation, which actually happened a couple weeks ago, was that a couple came in and they asked if they could have the charcuterie board without blue cheese.
Okay.
And I hadn't really I hadn't thought about that sort of scenario in terms of, okay, what do I do with the price of the board? Or am I going to do that? And I told them, okay, how about this? I'm going to bring you 4 ounces of the Belgian wit with the blue cheese. Give it a try because it's a really good combination. And if you don't like it, I'll take the cheese off. I'll discount the board for you.
Right.
I came back, the Belgian wit and the blue cheese were gone. And they said, we don't hate blue cheese. It's just kind of man, but with that beer, it was really, so it either gets you to like a cheese that you've never had because it recontextualizes it, or it gets you to like a style of beer you don't like because it recontextualizes it.
Right.
It brings out a flavor you didn't notice in the beer before, but now you kind of notice it across several examples of that style. Oh, they all kind of have that flavor to them.
Well, so you're also not only opening people's minds when it does come to the pairing of the, because there are still so many people that don't know beer and cheese go together the way they do, but you're opening them up to the taste in the cheese. And then also, like you said, going with noticing different patterns when it comes to having that beer. They'll have yours and then they'll go have another wit somewhere else. And they're like, oh, this is why this tastes like this. And they'll keep going from there. So,
and they also got a 4 ounce, pour of wit.
Exactly.
Complimentary. I was just like, try it, give it a try.
Which you have to do because, I've been in the alcohol business for, 15 years now, and you have to get it in their mouth. That you can sell it the bottle or sell whatever it is to them all day long, but until you get it in their mouth and they taste it and they decide they're on their own, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So are you now, what have you learned more about cheese and meat than you obviously never thought you would have however many years ago when you entered this class.
Yeah, I am
Yeah.
learning quite a bit. And you know, my wife has been saying lately, she's like, you should look into like classes, like cheesemonger
Um,
courses, you know, over the next year or two, like start getting some certifications in these things so
wow.
that, you know, with that will come the knowledge, but also the authority behind this concept that you're doing. Because
Right.
it's a passion right now. I do have some knowledge and know-how, but there are some cheese places around here where the owners and the operators are cheesemongers, you know, in
Ah,
the official sense. So really look forward at that sort of like, where does this progress for you?
yeah.
You know, as a professional, let's say, acolyte of beer and cheese. Like, I'm not a master yet. I'm
Right.
yeah.
Well, so explain to some people because so the sommelier is the wine equivalent of you
Yes.
knowing everything. Cicerone is the beer, and
Yep.
I'm guessing monger is the cheese.
Yes, and I
Okay.
think to use the word appropriately does mean that you have certifications.
Right. Okay. Wow, that's it. I didn't know the monger part. I just monger just sounded like an old way of saying that they are
And I
cheese
and
salesmen.
I
Yeah.
think it is, you know, you say like you could say a cheesemonger is a guy who's selling cheese,
Right.
and that's a perfectly acceptable, I think, modern. But I think that there is, when you dig into it, that there are certifications that make someone a professional cheesemonger.
Right. Now, what is there a meat version of this?
You know, I'd wonder. I hadn't looked into that
Okay.
at
Well,
all. I
I'm
wonder
curious.
if, yeah, smoked meats have a,
Yeah.
yeah, cured meats and smoked meats have a an equivalent there.
Yeah. Well, so
Because I know that like brewmaster gets thrown around a
hmm
lot,
hmm
and I know that there are like a master brewer has some sort of certification. Like you can go to the Siebel Institute and get a legitimate you know, training in the science and art and mechanics of brewing.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know if there's any official backing behind like a brewmaster or a master
Right.
brewer, or if that's just something some people call themselves when they've been brewing professionally for 20 years.
Well, it might be the same
Yeah,
thing with like barbecues and pit masters and stuff like that. So,
yeah,
like, are you like actually certified to be, run a barbecue pit
yeah,
or not? Yeah.
yeah.
So, trying to
People
think.
will ask me if I'm the brewmaster all the time.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of people like to use the word
Yeah.
on the other side of the bar,
True.
sort of like mixologist. I don't know many people that call themselves a mixologist, but people who like craft cocktails love to use the phrase. So,
Yes. Yeah. You're not just a bartender. You somehow have to up it.
yeah,
I'm a mixologist.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think most of the craft cocktail guys I know of call themselves like, no, I'm a bartender. I specialize in craft cocktails and
There
things
you
like
go.
that. Yeah,
Some people, there are so many people out there that just love the labels and need like extra titles to their name. So yeah,
yeah,
being called a mixologist or a brewmaster really puts them over the top for
yeah.
themselves.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah. You're learning more about the cheese, you're learning more about the meats, and obviously, like you just said, everyone's palate is so different. Somebody's going to drink a lager and taste something completely different than somebody else. Same thing with every other beer. And then obviously when you add more food on top of that, those pairings are always going to be, like you said, very different because everyone's
yeah,
palate is so different.
yeah.
When are you kind of when you guys come up with ideas, are you guys rotating on a regular basis, or are you just kind of, I mean, you guys did just open, so are you just trying to kind of see what's working and then kind of clear it off from there?
Yeah, we'd like to keep the charcuterie rotating a bit.
Yeah,
You know, we're still building relationships with some of the suppliers around here
right.
to open up our variety a little bit. We were also, you know, and this is a common refrain for people opening breweries. You open with a handful of beers and
Yeah,
then you're trying to fill your taps as people are consuming them. So
right.
we didn't have a lot of variety. So I didn't want to lean too heavily. Like we're not starting flights until next week because
Right.
we
That makes
just
sense.
now got a variety. So now that we're starting flights, we're going to start making a recommendation for whatever board we have, and we'll start exploring that. Um, but yeah, we want to kind of keep the rotation going.
Yeah.
So that there's always something new to try. And then again, once you have the variety, it's like open up flights,
Yeah.
start recommending things, start playing around with stuff. And I, do encourage, at shift meetings, have a little sample. If someone has found something that works, let us know. We're all going to have a little sample of it so that we can see what we're talking about. The blue cheese and the Belgian wit was an eye-opening experience for a few of us.
Right.
Like, oh wow, these two assertive, distinctly flavored things from two wildly different angles somehow come together and are better than the sum of their parts.
Right.
Yeah.
I imagine you're going to run into so much of that too, especially when you start, trying different things and, like you said, just randomly putting things together. You'd be like, okay, let's see how these work together. And then sometimes they might, sometimes they won't.
And then it is like some core concepts of like, if the cheese is strong, the beer can't be mild.
Right.
Right. It needs to be able to hold its own at the very least.
Right.
If the cheese is mild and you put a Belgian wit or an IPA on there, I venture to guess you're not going to taste the cheese much at all as soon as the beer hits your mouth.
True.
So they're or something really earthy, sort of like we have something, a Carmela, which is almost like I was reading up. It's like if Gouda and Parmesan had a baby. And it's really sort of nutty, earthy, sharp. If we had something like a porter or a stout on yet, or we got a Schwarzbier coming up, my suspicion would be those flavors will mix with some of those darker malts that are bringing a little bit of roast, a little bit of sweetness. Especially if they got those English hops in them that are bringing a lot of that earthiness, might find an inroad there. So thinking in terms of that.
Yeah, and then you're going to have so much fun, like you said, seasonally, trying to figure out beers and what's happening when it comes to cheese and meats and what time of year and how the temperature. And you guys obviously get way colder than we do.
I haven't even opened up the can of worms of like, where is the dairy coming from?
Right.
All of these cheeses, right? Because that's a whole other world of like knowing what to expect just from the type of milk it is.
Yeah. And then obviously the aging situation and you're going to have so much fun. So who are some breweries that when you were opening or, that you're still going through that have really kind of helped you out when it came to just shooting ideas or problems or, I imagine the scene up there is very collaborative as well. So
it is for sure. And I mean, Cadillac Straits, I've mentioned them a number of times. I was working there. When I started working there during the COVID lockdowns, I told them straight up, my plan is to be opening my own brewery. And this is a way for me to kind of get in, they needed help in their homebrew shop and they didn't bat an eye. They said, that's great. You're hired. 3.5 years later, which is, I think, longer than any of us expected. So they were really good. Gary and Gordy over there are good guys. There are Urban Rest. I think Travis is his name, and I'm gonna feel really bad if it's Tyler, because Trevor, Travis. I'm Thomas. So sorry, man. I was trying to think about how big of a CO2 tank I needed to get, and I just hopped over there because they're my local brewery. And they were more than happy to sit down and talk and talk about their equipment and who they're getting their CO2 supply from and why they suck and all that sort of stuff. And then a brewery in Nashville called New Heights.
Okay.
We had our rehearsal dinner there because we got married in Nashville. And they are fantastic people. I called them from here and just had a few questions early on when I didn't really know anybody other than these people that we had rented out their brewery. And they were more than happy to put me in touch with their brewer, their general manager, and just talk about whatever. So they're great. New Heights is fantastic. I honestly think they're the best beer in Nashville.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
people can come slide into my DMs if they want to argue about
There
that.
we go. I love it.